We tend to view towering self-esteem as the ultimate shield. We assume that with total confidence, they are immune to failure, rejection, or unhappiness. You probably know the type, the person who dominates the room, brags about their achievements, brushes off sensible advice, and demands constant attention. But watch what happens when that person receives even a mild critique. Instead of brushing it off with secure confidence, they lash out, reacting with an intense hostility or sudden aggression. Psychologists call this reaction threatened egotism. It occurs when an individual's self-views are highly positive but deeply fragile, meaning any perceived challenge to their worth triggers a harsh, defensive response. What we often mislabel as high self-esteem is actually a rigid, defensive shell constructed specifically to hide a deep-seated sense of insecurity. Let's compare two distinct structures: secure high self-esteem and defensive high self-esteem. People with secure self-esteem draw worth from an internal foundation, but defensive self-esteem is entirely conditional, relying on a steady stream of constant external validation just to stay upright. This outward pursuit makes sense when you look at human psychology. Psychologist Abraham Maslow identified that right after our physical safety is secured, our next most urgent drive is the need for love and belonging. We naturally seek approval from our peers to satisfy that drive. But relying on that approval creates an emotional roller coaster. When self-worth is tied up in a performance review, social media likes, or someone else's mood, a single minor setback can plunge you into deep feelings of shame or anxiety. If your sense of value requires a daily delivery of outside proof to survive, you aren't experiencing true self-esteem. You are simply managing a performance. To see how we end up relying on this external economy, we need to trace how our core self-worth is programmed from the beginning. In a healthy early childhood environment, parents provide unconditional love and authoritative support. This gives a child a stable, secure baseline, the deeply held belief that they deserve care simply because they exist. Then adolescence hits. Suddenly, moral and social demands multiply, and teenagers begin outsourcing their self-evaluation. Their worth is no longer tied to parental love, but to the highly conditional approval of their peers. During this phase, individuals develop a concept psychologists call the dreaded self. It is the intense psychological terror of failing to meet peer expectations and morphing into a social outcast. Leaving the unconditional safety of family to face the highly conditional judgment of society creates deep psychological friction. This transition is where the cracks form, allowing lifelong insecurities to take root. When an individual carries that reliance on external validation into adulthood, their brain adapts by hardwiring rigid negative biases. Their beliefs begin to strictly dictate how they process daily events. Visualize this mental filter as a funnel that actively blocks positive information. Objective strengths and direct compliments are automatically deflected because they don't match the insecure internal baseline. Simultaneously, this filter hyper-focuses on perceived flaws and criticisms, absorbing them instantly to overwhelm the person's self-image. This creates a devastating trap. A person can achieve massive financial or career success, but their negative bias actively filters it out. To their own emotional processing center, the success is functionally invisible. These negative biases lock high achievers into a paradox. Their growing success leaves them feeling exposed, forcing them to project an increasingly arrogant shell to protect a core that quietly feels worthless. Escaping this trap requires active rewiring. You have to migrate away from a system of external validation and deliberately cultivate an internal, unconditional sense of worth. The first vital step is untangling your value from your performance. You have to realize that a mistake is a human event you experience, not a definition of your underlying character. Next comes self-compassion. By choosing to treat yourself with the exact same grace and kindness you would offer a close friend, you short-circuit the cycle of shame that keeps defensive self-esteem running. Finally, you identify your true core values, deciding what you stand for completely independent of societal expectations, and actively reframe your harsh internal monologue to support those values. These cognitive steps rewire the brain's approach to value. self-esteem stops being a currency you have to constantly earn and becomes a steady foundation you inherently possess. But internal self-worth can't just exist as an idea in your head. It has to be cemented into reality through meaningful action. Studies show that practical, socially engaged activities, like volunteering or taking on community leadership roles, actively rebuild genuine confidence. These activities work because they generate intrinsic value and deep interpersonal connection. They completely bypass the toxic economy of likes, praise, and applause. Possessing secure self-esteem does not mean you suddenly believe you are flawless, and it won't make you immune to disappointment or hurt. True self-worth is much quieter. It is the unshakable resilience of knowing your value remains absolute and constant, even on your worst days.